I never thought, times are always hard in government, but I never did think I would actually have to have the Secretary of State for Local Government sharing something about flooding. Um, but one of the good things about the ghastly things that are happening in the UK at the moment in terms of flooding is I do think it has focused the mind rather properly on the issues that there are actually, that climate change is here, it is happening, and indeed needs to be recognised. And it's not just a thing that is happening, you know, in the stage of one particular Secretary of State's sort of small earthquake in Chile, not many people killed. It is rather immediate and really rather important. I'm not going to, I don't want to spend much time talking to you today. Many of you have heard me sort of droning on over the last 5 years about the sort of problems that I have perceived. And indeed, I think Ben and Phil are going to be sort of taking some of these on. But I think one of the things that I'd like to just sort of focus on very briefly is some of the work that was actually done. And you'll have seen that I'm now based a couple of days a week at the Oxford Martin School. And in a few months ago, they published an international commission report on Now for the Long Term, chaired by Pascal Lamy. Many sort of the great and the good in this world were actually members of that commission, and they have some sort of fairly interesting things to say, which I think are really pertinent to the discussions today. The sort of things that they were able to illustrate is, for example, is actually really quite a dramatic decline in poverty in terms of some parts of the world. In others, like far from the case. But give or take, there has been a massive decline in acutely defined poverty at the same in the last 15 years or so. And many of you who are professional people in the development world will be aware of this. But I think also some of the issues that are coming up from that are that there is a really significant rise in what we would term loosely in middle classes. And the Commission report sort of details this rather well for individual geographical regions, but the projections of the increase in middle class and the current status is really quite dramatic. Give or take in the developing world, and again one can query the definitions, about 1 billion people would be deemed as middle class, and with the consequent consumer behaviour of people in that. But that's increasing by 100 million a year. So by 2023, we're going to be seeing something of the order of 2 billion people who will have the consumer patterns of the middle classes. And manifestly, there is a bit of a difference between the middle classes in Central North America and the middle classes in Burundi. But these are big changes that are happening, and we need to be pondering those because, of course, the consequence both of the reduction in poverty and the increase in purchasing power of large sectors of the developing world means that you've got significant strain on the demand for natural resources. And if you couple that with the sort of thing that I typically have droned on about, is population change and urbanization, these things are really quite dramatic over a 10-year, 15-year timescale. And the sort of figures that we're seeing in terms of expected population growth for sub-Saharan Africa, something of the order of another 500 million people by 2025, increasing that population by 50%. And with most of these individuals living in urban rather than rural environments, this is breathtaking in terms of its implications of how we actually address these. It poses the urgency. It doesn't go any way to address the issues that Ben and Phil will be talking about, which are to do with complexity. But it is really quite dramatic. And one of the sort of given Scottish devolution, I thought I would give a Scottish illustration to this. Basically, or the potential for Scottish devolution, I should say. It is not a fact yet. But the change in Africa is essentially implying that you'll have 1,000 cities the size of Edinburgh in the next 12 years or so. And that is going to be quite dramatic. You know, hard to imagine. Asia, another 500 million people in the same period, but a population of 4 billion going up to 4.5 billion. Vastly less in terms of proportional change and the effects. And of course, and I've already mentioned it, you know, climate change is getting worse, or the implications of climate change are going worse. One of the things that I just don't think has been understood well enough is the time delays in the climate system, that the greenhouse gases that were in the atmosphere in the 1990s are what are actually determining climate today, and that climate is in a sense determining weather. And we know the trajectory of greenhouse gas emissions has been up since the 1990s. So looking forward into the future, pretty much what's up there now is going to be determining the sort of climate and therefore the weather for the next 20 or 25 years. And that time delay is really quite important because it means even if you see some international action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and that is a very big if, you are going to be seeing worsening weather patterns. And the Met Office, Julia Slingo, their chief scientist, made the point over the weekend that we have got to expect this increasing severity of weather, and we've got to expect that the 1 in 100 year event will be turning out to be 1 in 10 years or indeed 5. And I do recall my first year in government was I was the chief scientific advisor and relatively naive when I heard 3 successive secretaries of state saying about different events, these were 1 in 100 year events. Seemed to me that this was a fairly low probability event, that you had 3 1 in 100 year events in 3 successive years. But you'll see that sort of rhetoric being used, but hopefully with some rather better tempering of what in fact is happening. And I think that that is really to be accepted. And I think I've talked about the UK, but I think the effect of Hurricane Sandy was really to address some of these issues from the American public in a way that hitherto I don't think they had got linked in. So these, in a sense, these are the problems, these are the settings, there is some recognition, but don't kid yourself, this is an enormously difficult problem. And it is a problem for development. It is a problem in which if we are going to get any improvement, there is obviously major political activities that have got to occur, but in a sense, we've got to be thinking about the way in which science, and I would include with science and engineering, and I would also include social science, needs to actually be thinking about how we can address these very complex issues. So that's enough from me. I would like now to, I think Andre reminded you that you're going to be on film, but she also asked me to say, look, if you want to tweet about the experience, even if you want to say this is completely ghastly, Beddington said what he always says, or something like that, which I'm more than content for you to do. That we are going, but do feel that you should tweet. Between the gaps in speakers, Ben is going to come next, and I'll introduce him. But one of the other things that Andre would like to do is to actually make certain that you introduce yourself to the people next to you. This seems to me the sort of speed dating in the development and complexity world that I feel very uncomfortable with. I'm a very old man, as you can tell, and such things were not commonplace when I was younger and more interested in such things. But I think it's a good idea. You are here. This is a community. You've all chosen to come here. So I think that there is a really good idea to actually have a chance to actually say, I'm not going to sort of say you have to bond and shake hands and give each other a large kiss. That would seem to me a bit on the excessive side, but at least say who you are and maybe even agree to meet or discuss something over lunch. So that's the sort of introduction and the bureaucracy of it. One of the things that of the benefits, and I am now a fellow of this organisation. And Andre was, one of the benefits was Andre gave me Ben's latest book, The Aid on the Edge of Chaos. And it's quite hard going, Ben. It is not light reading. I would not go so far as to be pejorative and say it's a great aid to insomnia, which it is not, but it is quite challenging. It's the sort of thing that you probably would like to read with a drink in your hand rather than actually settle down quietly at 8:30 on a Sunday morning to read. But it's an excellent book. Ben has worked and advised lots of development in humanitarian organisations. He's worked for various UN bodies, various NGOs, he's worked for the Red Cross, and he's worked for government agencies. But I think the idea of thinking about complexity in the way he has in the book is really tremendously important. And I think it actually poses a challenge, whether that challenge is going to be taken up by the enormous bureaucracy that we face in the development community, and in the scientific and engineering aspects of development is a different matter. But pose the problem, it's got to be done. So with that, I'll pass over to Ben. Thank you.